Hey everyone. Most people dream about how they can use cryptocurrency trading to explode their wealth, grow your money by 10x in one big shot. But I think that the problem with that kind of strategy is that you will always end up with a possibility of also blowing up your wealth in a bad way, meaning that you lose all of it, right? So although you can hope that your money gets bigger with cryptocurrency trading, sometimes the reverse happens. It actually gets a lot smaller. And sometimes you might even lose it all. What I'm going to show you here today is a different approach altogether. It is still involving cryptocurrencies, but instead of growing your wealth in one big explosion or losing it in all one big explosion, liquidity farming is a slow, incremental gain on your cryptocurrency wealth, a little bit every day, a little bit at a time. And there is no chance for your money to go to zero. If that sounds interesting to you, then let's get into it. This is liquidity farming step by step. Okay, so what do you need to know in order to get started? One, you need to have some kind of DEX familiarity. You need to have used at least one of these big decentralized exchanges. Uniswap is the best known, but there's DEXs in every single blockchain out there. I hope that you've seen or used at least one of them. I'm not going to explain how these things work. I already did a video on that previously, so look for that link in the description if you want to get the fundamentals. But you need to have some familiarity with this before we get started. The second is that you need at least $500 in capital that is available for you to use and experiment with and learn with. Again, you're not going to lose this $500. Your money is not going to go to zero with this strategy. However, we recommend that you start with at least $500 because if you go a little bit too low, maybe like $100, $200, the gas fees of the on-chain transactions that we'll be doing will actually start to eat in to your capital a little bit too much, and then you won't get to enjoy the profits. Remember that gas fees are flat. They're not percentage based. The bigger your principal amount, the less you will feel these gas fees. So if you have $500 to start with, that's probably best. The third requirement is that you need at least 1 to 2 hours of available time per week to kind of figure out your strategy for these things. That's an estimate. It'll actually break down to a few minutes every day, but in aggregate over a week, you will probably spend somewhere between 1 to 2 hours. This is very different from trading, because with trading, usually we'll spend like 1 to 2 hours a day, or even more than that sometimes. And you will definitely be looking at the market price nearly every couple of minutes sometimes. It is also different from something very passive like staking, for example, or putting your money into a term deposit or something like that. Those are 0 hours a week. You make the decision once and then you just forget about it, and then you collect your money at some point in the future. This is also not like that. So this is kind of like what I would call a semi-passive investment. It's only 1 to 2 hours a week, but it's not zero. So you will need to kind of manage your money a little bit at a time. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We are going to learn how to make a liquidity pool position for BTC ETH on Aerodrome. If you don't understand what I just wrote, there is a video that I created some months ago that explains kind of the basics of liquidity farming. I suggest that you go over that first and then come back here. Again, I'm not going to explain the basic concepts underneath this stuff. I'm just going to go right into it. This was more meant to be like a step-by-step guide. So this is what we're going to aim to do today, and I'm going to walk you through the process end to end. Okay? So let's start with our wallet. My favorite wallet is Rabby Wallet. For certain reasons, I'll show you exactly why I like it as we're doing this demonstration, but you can download it for free. Just go to rabby.io. It works with all browsers. We're gonna pretend that I went through the installation process, so I've already got Rabby installed, and I have $1,057 in my Rabby wallet. I'm gonna use $1,000 for this demonstration. There's 1,000 USDC in here, and then 0.01 Ethereum. I'm going to use that to pay for any gas fees. Now, we have 1,000 USDC and 0.01 Ethereum on the Ethereum chain, right? And remember that our goal was to create a liquidity position on Aerodrome, which is not on Ethereum. It's actually on the base layer 2. So our first task is to bridge our money from Ethereum to base layer. So one of Rabi's nice features is that it actually has bridging built in. So if you wanted to kind of bridge from Ethereum to one of the other layers, you could go here, say from Ethereum, USDC to base, also USDC, and it'll actually give you a quote. Now, I don't usually use Rabi for bridging because they actually have their own fees on top of this. In fact, you can actually see that in the breakdown here. Rabi charges 0.25. So I don't use Rabi itself. I don't like that you lose, you lose almost $3 here. What I do is I go directly to the bridges that I like. The one that I have here is called Bungee. It works the same way, it's just that it's a website instead of Rabi's built-in one. And you can see here that if you use Bungee, there is a much smaller hit on your funds. When you bridge from Ethereum USDC to base USDC, you only lose 12 cents. And remember, in the previous example with Rabi, you were losing something like almost $3, right? So we're gonna use this instead. I'll hit swap now. This is going to take at least 1 minute, so. And while we wait, I am going to make myself another cup of coffee. Cool. I think we're done. Let me check. Okay. So you can see here on the Rabi wallet that we now have 999.89 USDC, and it is now on the base network. So we're ready to go. We have our money. Now we're going to go to Aerodrome, which is the exchange that we're going to provide liquidity to. And I'm going to talk through some of the things that I like about Aerodrome. The first is that it's got some really massive amounts of volume on it, right? And what we're looking for when we are a liquidity provider is we want to make sure that the exchange that we're putting the money into has a lot of volume. You need activity because, again, the fees that you are earning from being an LP is directly tied to volume. I always go to Aerodrome because it's one of the largest, and it's also kind of very directly supported by Coinbase. We'll see that again later on. It's one of the most popular exchanges out there, and for that reason, I like using it. Not to mention that the base layer itself has very low gas fees, so it can kind of reduce some of the costs, right? So that's kind of the two reasons why we're picking Aerodrome for this particular example. Although, if you were more of a Solana person, then you would probably be able to do some very similar things in Solana in their own dexes. I really like Orca. I've used Orca all the time. And I do have LPs in Orca on the Solana ecosystem also. So, okay, what we are looking at here is a list of all the liquidity pools inside Aerodrome. So the first thing I'll do is I'll sort them by volume. And you can see obviously that the most popular crypto pair is ETH USDC. Meaning that, yeah, it turns out that the most popular cryptocurrency trading pair in Ethereum is Ethereum to US dollar. No kidding. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. In the last 24 hours or so, they did about $1.76 billion in volume. Pretty good. What is the next highest? Well, it's ETH to BTC. If you don't know what cbBTC is, that's actually the Coinbase issued version of the Bitcoin wrap for the Ethereum network. Obviously, Bitcoin itself, the actual Bitcoin token, doesn't work inside Ethereum, so they have to wrap it into a tokenized form so that BTC can be traded inside Ethereum. And cbBTC means that it is Coinbase that is issuing this particular token wrap. And that's fine. For our purposes, this is completely okay. And what we're now going to do is we're going to focus all of our attention on this. ETH BTC, it has a volume of $693 million in the last 24 hours. Again, pretty good. And then also, we know that it's paying out real fees, right? So it paid out $370,000 in fees to the various LP providers that have put their money into this thing. And you can kind of see how much that actually is in total. There's $17.59 million worth of LP capital and money in this pool. So it's quite popular. There's quite a lot of people that have put money in it. You're probably wondering, why do I like BTC ETH instead of, say, ETH USDC? I mean, clearly this is making more volume. This is, producing more fees. Why don't I choose that? The reason why I choose this BTC ETH is because I am looking for a very specific kind of relationship between the two tokens. In this particular case, I'm looking for correlation. So what do we mean by correlation? So let's consider the Bitcoin price. We all know that Bitcoin price is always up and down, but over time usually tends to trend upwards like this, right? Now, what we are hoping for to see from ETH is something similar. Although ETH will go up and down a lot, we hope that eventually it will also go up. It will kind of trend upwards. And we don't care so much about the absolute values here. What we care about is the percentage gain or drop, right? That's what we care about. And when we are talking about the correlation between two assets, we are talking about how they are both moving up by a certain percentage point, or they're both going down by a certain percentage point, and it's all kind of happening within the same time frame. So maybe like in the last week, Bitcoin is up 5%. Hopefully ETH is up maybe 2%, maybe 3%, maybe 7%, but it's also up. And then likewise, when Bitcoin is down 5%, so -5, we hope that ETH will be, maybe it was also going to be down, maybe -2, -3, -7, minus whatever, right? And that's what we mean by correlation. It does not have to be exact. They don't have to both go up by 5% or down by 5%, but they have to be kind of in the same range of each other. And the reason why we are looking for that is because that is how our LPs will earn. They need to be, the two assets need to be within range of each other. If they're not, then they will go out of range, and then you will not be able to earn anymore. Your earnings kind of stop. And if you understand how LPs work, as I explained in my previous video about this, you'll understand what that means. When you are out of range, your LP stops earning, and then it just kind of sits there doing nothing, right? Now, let's go back to the other example, the ETH USDC LP. Why do we not use ETH USDC? Well, think about the price movement of ETH, right? So in this graph, it's kind of going up, right? What does USDC do? Well, USDC is flat. It doesn't change, right? It's always going to be just USDC. And what that means is that although you might be in range for some of this, right? Because maybe all of this stuff is kind of within range. As soon as ETH breaks out in any meaningful way, you will suddenly no longer be in range, because USDC is just, it never moves. It's always going to be just kind of there as a baseline. So it is actually far more likely that you will go out of range when one of your assets is a stable coin, because it'll never move, and the other asset will always go all over the place relative to it. So they are not correlated at all. And although ETH USDC, this particular pool, usually does very well in terms of daily earnings, you will find that you are going to be out of range a lot, because ETH moves in price a lot, especially in the last couple of months and weeks. Meanwhile, Bitcoin and ETH at least have a small chance of correlating together. And we've certainly seen a higher amount of correlation between Bitcoin and ETH over just this last month. This is, I'm recording this in August of 2025, and we have seen that Bitcoin and ETH are kind of moving directionally together. We had a couple of weeks where ETH was doing well, Bitcoin was doing well. We had a couple of weeks where Bitcoin was not doing so well, and ETH was also not doing well. And that's what we want. You don't care so much about what the absolute prices of these two are, as long as they are kind of moving in roughly the same direction at roughly the same time. And that's what we're looking for. That's why we're picking Bitcoin Ethereum as our main LP that we're going to be participating in. Okay? Okay, so let's go back to the Aerodrome ETH BTC pool that we're going to set up for the first time. And we're going to walk through how all of this works. So what are the 3 steps that we need? Well, firstly, we need to make sure that we're in the right pool, right? So this is it, ETH BTC. You can kind of ignore these other numbers for now. They're not super important. But these two here is super important. Set price range. This is where we set
the active range wherein trading will occur using our capital, right? And then down here is the deposit amount. Ideally, we use our entire $1,000 budget on this thing, and I'll show you how to do that later. But let's go into setting our price range first. You'll notice that there's some helpers here where Aerodrome is already kind of trying to help you get started. It's recommending a price range that is plus or minus 3% of whatever the current price is. That's way too narrow. I would never use this. You would go out of range within hours if you use that. I'm usually somewhere between here, plus or minus 8 all the way to plus or minus 15. So I consider plus or minus 8 the smallest range that you would kind of realistically use. And then plus minus 15, that's a little bit more on the conservative side. If you are expecting a particularly wild week of volatility, then I would probably go plus or minus 15. But if you're kind of expecting things to just be a little uneventful, or you expect Bitcoin and ETH to really track each other's movements, then you would go plus or minus 8. I would probably pick plus or minus 10%, and I'll show you how to do that properly. So we'll start by clicking this, plus or minus 8. Actually, let's get rid of our notes so it's not distracting. So this is what plus or minus 8 looks like. Your low point is 0.033, and your high point is 0.039. This is the number of Bitcoins per Ethereum. That is hard to read. That is a very long decimal place. So one of the things I have found that will make life a little bit easier is you kind of flip the unit. And so now it's in slightly more whole numbers. It's still plus or minus 8, but it is now being expressed as numbers, the number of ethers for one Bitcoin. So on the first part of the range, you have 25 ETH per Bitcoin, and then on the low side of the range, you have 29 ETH per Bitcoin. But remember that we wanted to have plus or minus 10%. So we're going to adjust these numbers a little bit. As of recording, the number is 1 Bitcoin is to 27.15 ETH. So if we are going to try to if we're going to treat that as our center point, and we are going to have to figure out what minus 10% of that is, and then what is plus 10% of that is. And that's relatively easy. It doesn't have to be super accurate here. We do know that the high will need to be more like 24.6. It's just kind of basic math. And then the low will need to be something closer to 31. And you can see the graphic here kind of adjusting for you. So you can kind of see that these two ranges need to be slightly similar to each other. This is probably fine for all intents and purposes. We don't need to be super accurate here. The idea is that you are giving it a nice big range, plus or minus 10%. And you can see also that as we were kind of adjusting our numbers, our high and our low, the APR was changing, right? So I'm just going to exaggerate it a little bit so you can kind of see here. So as the range gets bigger, the APR gets lower, right? So we want to basically look for a nice balance between a nice conservative price range and an APR that is still kind of profitable. 85% APR is very good. That means that in practice, what will happen is that if you run this thing for a year without kind of going out of range, you will almost double your money. So your $1,000 will earn 85% or $850. And that's freaking great if you can get away with that, right? And now we're going to look at deposit amounts. This is the part where it gets a little bit more tricky. You notice that it is asking you to deposit both a certain amount of BTC and then a certain amount of WETH. Remember that we don't have either of those things, right? We only have 1,000 USDC, so we're actually going to have to do some trading. We know that we have 1,000. We're going to try to see if we can get this to help us calculate exactly how much we need. So if I had 0.1 ETH, I would also need 0.037 BTC in order to create my LP. right? That's what that means. But we have a little bit more than that, right? So if you see the number here, it says my 0.1 is equivalent to $416, and then my 0.03 BTC, that's equivalent to $425, right? So we know that we have a little bit more than that, because if you add those two numbers together, it's only $850. That means we have we have $150 left. So we're going to slightly adjust this and see what happens. 0.18. And this is pretty close. Okay, now we basically have our targets. These are the amount of ETH that we need to buy and the amount of BTC that we need to buy at current rates. So now we go into the swap. And what we're going to do is we're going to buy the ETH and the USDC that we need. Okay, sorry, quick commercial break there. I actually forgot that there was no ETH in my base layer wallet. So I had to kind of bridge some from Ethereum. So now we have some gas. Let's do that again. Maybe 492. Okay, now we're gonna swap. And now we're going to take the remaining USDC and buy cbBTC with it. And there you go, swap that. Cool. So now we can go back here. Unfortunately, it's really hard to kind of get these numbers exact. So there's always going to be like a little bit left over, but you know, we tried our best. Okay, so what we've done now is we have deposited all of our assets. That's what we're doing. We're just giving permission. And there you go. So the deposit has been confirmed. Now, I'm going to go back to the dashboard so you can see what that looks like. We now have a ETH BTC liquidity position. We've got our deposit number there. And then you can kind of see the APR. You can kind of just ignore these APR estimates. They're very all over the place. I've been using the ETH BTC pool for quite some time now, and I can tell you that it's actually much closer to about 30 to 50% APR on average. This is kind of like a one-off thing. Like when you see it do single digits like that, it's just because there's not a lot of trading volume at that particular moment in time. It doesn't actually mean that, you know, that's all you're gonna get. Okay, so you can actually, at this point, you're done. You can actually just leave this and then just start earning the trading fees here. Obviously, there's no trading fees yet because, I mean, we literally just created it a minute ago. However, you can take one extra step and you can actually stake your liquidity position itself. You can take this LP, tokenize it, and put it into a staking vault, and you will earn a little bit more from that. I usually stake it, but the difference, and this is the part that you should understand, if you normally expected that you were going to earn trading fees that were either ETH or BTC or a little bit of both, which is kind of what is normally going to happen in your average LP, you'll earn the two tokens that you have staked. That's fine. When you are staking, you won't earn this. What you'll instead earn is arrow emissions, right? Assuming that you staked it. Yeah, so when you stake, you earn this. When it's unstaked, you earn that. Now, why do you want to earn arrow emissions instead? It's better by about 15%, maybe 20% at most. And if you want, you can even do other things, like you can lock up your arrow earnings and earn even more from that down the road. So there's all sorts of little things that you can do here. I personally just stake my position and then I just leave it at that. That's it. We're done at this point. When you go back to your dashboard, you'll see now that it has been staked, right? And then you will start to earn emissions in Arrow instead of in ETH and BTC. And then you just claim it. So what we're going to do over the next couple of videos is, I'm not going to touch this LP. I'm going to let it continue to earn on its own quietly. And then we'll use this for demonstrations again later on when, so for example, if we need to rebalance, if we go out of range, if we want to start claiming some of our earnings, and then what do we do with them afterwards. I'll keep using this one particular LP as our main demonstration. I know that there's going to be a lot of questions about this, so please feel free to ask questions in the comments. Understand that there's probably a lot of stuff that we'll continue to cover in other videos, especially when it comes to things like rebalancing or avoiding things like impermanent loss and things like that. So let's keep the conversation open. I hope you found this useful. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and let's keep earning money from LP farms. See you, everyone.